One day, this guy Roberto, he's on a flight, and the plane is flying over the mountains. And suddenly, boom, the plane clips one of the mountain peaks, and the tail of the plane falls off. Then the rest of the plane, bam, crashes into a snow-covered mountain, and it slides down all the way until it finally stops. Now Roberto, he's still alive, but then he looks and he notices the nightmare around him. The other passengers are scattered all over the plane, they're bleeding and screaming in pain, and the entire back of the plane is missing. So now all the survivors are stranded in the middle of nowhere on a snow-covered mountain surrounded by glaciers. And they're in sub-zero temperatures, and it's hard to breathe because of the altitude. And to make it worse, the plane's power source was in the back. So there's now no way to power the radios to call the outside world to help. And of the 45 people on the plane, only 33 survived the crash. So Roberto and the other 32 passengers are just stuck there. So now what are they gonna do? Well, first, the group scrounges for food and any supplies they can find in the wreckage. And they huddle together to survive, hoping that rescue teams soon show up. That night, the temperature drops and it gets as low as negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, which in Celsius is, I don't know because I'm American, but it's really fucking cold. But anyway, everyone ends up sleeping inside the only shelter they have, the plane wreckage. And that first night, 5 of them don't survive. So now they're down to 28 people. Now aside from the cold, they have another problem. They don't really have any food. And they end up searching through all the luggage, looking for anything, and they find a little bit. Some candy bars, a can of mussels, some jars of jam, but that's about it. So this is all they have to feed 28 starving people. So they start rationing it. And luckily, one of the passengers finds a transistor radio and he manages to get it working. And through that radio, they can hear news reports about their plane going missing and how there's rescue teams out looking for them. And suddenly, the passengers are overjoyed. I mean, it's only a matter of time before someone finds them. So they're out there for about a week, waiting to be rescued. And then, of course, they run into another problem. That small bit of food they were rationing runs out. Oh, and that's not even the worst part. Through that transistor radio, they get a news update. That rescue team that's been looking for them for over a week, they can't find them. So it's now assumed that Roberto and all the passengers on this flight are dead. And because of that, the rescue mission has been called off. No one is coming to save them. So there they are, stuck on a mountain in sub-zero temperatures with no one coming to save them, and they have nothing to eat. Until at some point, Roberto is basically like, well, there is one thing we could eat. He suggests that they eat the bodies of the other dead passengers. And at first, people are like, oh, gross, no way, we could never do that. But Roberto, he's like, I'm just gonna try one little bite. And he does, and it's horrible, and it's humiliating, but hey, it's food. And soon enough, the rest of the passengers get on board. And pretty quickly, eating people becomes part of the group's daily life. But whatever, finally, the group is no longer starving, and that gives them a little bit of hope. Until again. At this point, they've been stuck on this mountain for 17 days. And one night, they're all sleeping. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a huge avalanche comes down. And it immediately kills 8 of them, and it buries the rest of them inside the plane wreckage. So now there's only around 19 or 20 passengers left. Those remaining passengers are trapped in that plane wreckage for about 3 days before they're finally able to dig themselves out. And over the next month, they're still out there stuck on this mountain. And over that time, they lose 3 more people. But after these last few passenger deaths, Roberto has finally decided he's had enough. They've been stuck out there for 2 months, and Roberto's like, man, we are gonna die if we stay out here. And it's super risky, but they decide to climb off the mountain and find help. So he and 2 other guys pack a bunch of rugby socks with human meat to take with them, and they set off on this expedition to find civilization. They have no climbing gear, no compass, and they're up to their waist in snow. Regardless, they're gonna try and make it work, and they hike for 3 days before one of the guys finally turns back, and he leaves his food rations for the other 2. So Roberto and the other survivor, they hike in the snow for another week. And then they see a river, and they follow it down for a while, and then they start to see grass, and eventually some cows. Then they spot a couple of local ranchers on horseback, and one of the ranchers had heard about the plane crash, because at this point the story had been all over the news. And that rancher doesn't have a phone. He lives in the middle of nowhere. But he gets on his horse, and he rides 10 hours to the nearest town to go get help. And soon, finally, after 72 days of being stuck on that mountain, helicopters show up to the mountain to rescue the remaining passengers. And you guys already know this story. They made like 3 movies about it and like 100 documentaries. Anyway, shout out to the Andes.